Hello everyone, today I'm looking at Silent Hill 4, The Room. There are a lot of the room jokes were made during the playing of this video game. One thing I have to say though about Silent Hill 4 is that I really liked this game, and it was a game that I was going to drop at first because I heard mixed things about it. I heard either people hate Silent Hill 4 or they say it's actually very underrated and the last true Team Silent game before Silent Hill as we know it is basically no longer being made. It might still have the brand name at Konami, but there doesn't seem to be anything that really compares to the original series of 1, 2, 3, and I would include 4 here. So 4 is kind of like the lost child of the mix that no one really talks about, and there's a reason for that I'm going to get into. So first of all, the reason I was going to drop this game, and I'm glad I didn't, is because the intro is terrible. It is the worst intro I have seen to a Silent Hill game or a game in general. For example, there's the difference between the intro and the opening. The intro is the segment in which you have the opening animation or film graphics, like the trailer kind of. And this was always super well done and super important in the first 3 games. 1, 2, and 3, 1 with its very famous balalaika, 2 with its guitar solo, and 3 with Heather in a kind of music video-esque sequence. It's stunning. It's beautiful. 4's intro sucks. It just flat out sucks. It fades into the title screen and gives you a Dark Souls moan, and then you have this really bad, choppy, low frame footage that is supposed to look scary, but it's never ever scary. And then it very soon into that movie, you have the the dogs who make the cheetah noise, and the cheetah noise they make, or jaguar, is like a stock sound effect that immediately breaks immersion. It's bad. It's really bad. And you're going through the entire intro, and it just gets worse. It's just choppy footage, just gameplay of combat and not of the characters that much, really. And then there's this one part where it brings in a song, the main song, which is the lullaby song, which is very beautiful, and then it immediately cuts it out to white static, and then gives you the title screen again. So it's a terrible intro, absolutely. The other thing is the opening. So the opening is when you actually start the game. It breaks the cardinal rule of storytelling, where it's tell, don't show, where it starts with this text on the screen telling you Henry's moved in 5 days ago, and he's having visions and nightmares for the past 5 days, and he can't leave his room. And it is so lazy. It is so lazy and so poorly managed. It must be like the rushed last part of the game that was made. That's the only way it makes sense, because it's terrible. And I just immediately thought, I'm not playing this game. And I'm really glad I stuck with it, because once I started playing the game and I got into the gameplay, oh, and by the way, even the beginning segment, you end up going into this hole in your wall, and you end up in the other world. And every time you go through the hole again, you wake up in reality, or rather in your bed, as if you were dreaming. So it's all the dream. Meanwhile, you're trying to go outside your door. And the first level, it just starts. There's no context. There's no really anything. And you meet this girl called Cynthia who tempts you. And that's it. And if it was not for the really tightly designed level structure and puzzles in this game, I would have dropped it. But I'm really glad I didn't, because it has maybe one of my favorite Silent Hill stories that was uncovered in this. But I completely understand why this first hour, it's not good at all, and it gets dramatically better the more you play, which is kind of a shame that it is structured like that. So what is Silent Hill 4 really about? Well, you're this guy, Henry Townsend, who's trapped in this apartment room, and he's trying to leave, and he can't for some reason, and he's having nightmares, and the nightmares are actually him in the other world. And so he basically crawls through this hole that appears in his bathroom, And every time he goes in the hole, he ends up through a hole in the other area, in the other world. And so he just has to find stuff out. And so the story that actually reveals itself is actually pretty interesting, where it still meshes the whole aspect of personal psychology and the interior world, but it also adds in a lot more of a murder mystery where there's a serial killer essentially on the loose who's a copycat serial killer, apparently, and he's taking out certain victims, and you begin to realize the pattern of the people you see dying in the other world also die in real life. And there's a whole other, segment of this. The main gameplay change, I would say, is the fact that the room that you're in is this semi-static environment. I mean, it does change over time, where you're in first-person mode, and you basically go around the apartment, the same apartment, inspecting the stove, the washing machine, all the very basic banal items in your living space. And as time goes on, it gets more and more deranged, and as Henry's mind goes more and more, the environment also changes. And it's a really cool concept. I actually like the idea that you could turn a very normal area into something actually horrific, because it's kind of always been a staple of the Silent Hill series. It also definitely really reminded me as almost a prototype for PT. The idea that you're going through the exact same hallway over and over and over again with, again, very tight corners, and just the way the camera's positioned, you can't see anything really in your periphery vision, so you always have to turn, and it's always a shock when there's something that's changed. And it's kind of good jump scare material, kind of, even though this is not a jump scare game at all, believe me. I forgot how good psychological horror feels and how well written it can be. And so as you go through your apartment building, you also get notes and things under the door. Another bit aspect is that you have a peephole later that you soon find, and you use it to spy on your neighbor Eileen, who is the main female cast, and she gets involved in the other world, and you end up helping her in the other world when you come back to reality, and that whole thing. And so here's the other thing that is really interesting, is that I really like Eileen. Like, Eileen became a character I actually really ended up enjoying, and Henry not so much. So this is the other major thing that's very interesting about Silent Hill 4, is that the other major thing that Silent Hill praises itself on is not only its music, its intros, but also its main characters. I think that a lot of people, or at least I certainly think, that Silent Hill 3 on its own isn't actually a great game. Like, the actual gameplay, the pacing, whatever, I don't really enjoy it. But Heather as a character is such a strong lead role that I think she completely leads that game. She carries it completely because it's so interesting as a main character. And here, again, it's very much the opposite, that Henry is not a good character, but he's not essentially a bad character either. He's really a fill-in for the player. He doesn't have very impactful dialogue. He doesn't have any iconic lines. He's kind of like a slate for us to inhabit. And so once you kind of get over that hump, you kind of enjoy it. And Eileen really steals the show here. She kind of becomes the main lead role, I would say, almost then the main antagonist, who was Walter, which we're gonna get to. But yeah, again, I think what really kept me here was the actual pacing of the gameplay. I've always loved the Silent Hill map system, the essence where you go around and you find certain locked doors and it already marks it on your map, and you feel like you're making constant progress. The puzzles always feel fun and intuitive, and they were very, very, I would say, rudimentary in a way. They weren't super complicated, which I was kind of fun because I could just get through them very quickly without feeling they were too hard or whatever. The other thing that also got me is that there's a very distinct game loop in 4, more so than the previous games. And what I mean by that is, Heather might be in a shopping mall and then in a bakery or in like an underpass, and this segment is going to take maybe an hour, maybe an hour and a half, and then you're going to have another cutscene and it continues. 4 has the benefit of having it all kind of take place in a dream state, so that you kind of know roughly how long the dream lasts. And what occurs is that these levels are very, very short. They're only maybe half an hour in length. And really the main objective is kind of to get to the end of the level. It's actually to go through it very quickly. And what's really cool is that in the second half of the game, past the halfway point, you actually start going through all the levels with Eileen, but now when you're revisiting the levels, you realize there were a bunch of puzzles and things kind of sprinkled throughout the levels that you actually didn't solve. And so even though it feels like a lazy thing in theory to come back to a previous level, now you're finally coming back to it and completing it with your upgraded arsenal. You have more supplies, and you also have Eileen with you. And this is another weird gameplay mechanic that I actually really enjoy. People really don't usually like escort missions. Obviously, relying on a AI to basically, not die is very, very frustrating and usually doesn't work. But what's really convenient about this part is that Eileen, she cannot die. She's basically invulnerable, and she's only there as a support character, or she can read certain things off the walls or do certain other things. The only annoying issue is that when you're transitioning from certain areas, if she's not kind of within a meter of you and you open up a door, she's going to be left in the previous room. So you have to go back and fetch her, which is a bit of a time save, but usually if there's things like ghosts or other monsters, they usually despawn when you're coming back together, which is fair, I would say. And then it becomes very predictable. You know exactly or roughly how much time each level is going to take. And all the levels in the second half, again, they're just revisiting all the previous things, and you come to the very last level and then the final confrontation. And I do kind of enjoy that feeling of, how would I say, projection, or telegraphing rather to the player how long or how vast this game is. In the first 5 levels, you don't have to get a sense of that until, the second half, which is, again, fine. In terms of combat, it's mainly unchanged, but I did take note that Henry feels very smooth to control. I think it is the best, controlling character of the Silent Hill franchise. It's still the same basic 3-button attack combo with firearms. In this instance, Henry ends up using a variety of weapons from box cutters to fire axes to shovels, and also a collection of golf clubs. I'm not exactly sure what that's about. Maybe it's a secret ending or the UFO ending or something. But there's a series of breakable golf clubs. Every other melee weapon is not breakable, but these ones are for some reason. And you can collect a full set of the 3 to 9 iron for some reason. And so that's part of the game. It's actually funny. The main other gameplay aspect is the inventory system. So you can only hold 10 items at once, including, quest items, and you have a box in your room. And so a lot of the meta gameplay, if you will, revolves around finding strategic holes that wake you up and spawn you back in your room that allow you to manage your inventory. And so usually you'll have too many things, or you pick up too many bullets or items or whatever, and so you have to drop things off, and that's kind of part of the meta mechanic of the game as you go through collecting things. It's also interesting to note that in this Silent Hill, while the previous ones have had a wide variety and selection of firearms, here you only have 2, which is the pistol and the Magnum, which honestly didn't really bother me at all, because they were just 2 different weapons for 2 separate applications. Weaker enemies far away and stronger enemies far away. I didn't find the lack of other firearms a problem in this game. I thought it was actually rather appropriate and felt just right, especially when you're worrying about inventory management. The other thing about the inventory that's really cool about this game is that it's no longer in a menu, just selected straight in gameplay, which also adds to the stress if you're trying to heal during a fight, which can definitely happen quite a bit. In this one, the ghosts are a new enemy type in which they kind of float around and they haunt you, and you get all the radio static and whatever. And what ends up occurring is that they can attack you and they really can't die. In fact, the only thing you can do about the ghosts, besides running away from them, is you can use a holy candle to basically incapacitate them, or you can find a much rarer weapon called a Sword of Obedience and stab them through the body, and to keep them suppressed there. And I find that very, very cool as a mechanic, that there is this kind of nemesis-like enemy that is constantly pursuing you. I mean, it can't move through walls or rooms, but it's constantly pursuing you. It's invulnerable, and the only way to deal with it is to basically subdue it. You can't fully kill it. And I think it's good to have a mixture of those kinds of enemies and then the normal enemies that you can deal with, and they'll be permanently dispatched throughout the rest of the game. So I thought that was a really cool new mechanic, and just the actual idea behind it and the concept of subduing a ghost with a magical sword by putting it in the ground I've never seen that before. Another thing that also surprised me is the Holy Candle is an anti-ghost weapon, specifically for those ghosts. Also a medallion you can equip. That made me think of Phasmophobia, which is, a multiplayer survival ghost game where you're using a series of random items to essentially survive the ghost attacks. And I think it'd be really cool if it was based on this game or something else. But the idea of a multiplayer Silent Hill 4 experience, I guess that would be the closest thing to Phasmophobia, I would say. This is a 2004 game, so it also takes inspiration from other things at the time of the culture. For example, whenever Henry goes into the hole, he has this video feed of this grain filter, and he's getting closer towards a ring, which obviously looks like the ring. And there's also quite a few ghosts in this game that remind me of the grunge girl with the long hair, and actually even the ring girl with the long hair coming out of the TV. And so you definitely have those influences here as well. Of course, the main star of the show is always the music design, the sound design by Akira Yamaoka. Again, there are some things in here that are just not great, like the fact that the dogs make cheetah sounds is kind of distracting, but you kind of get used to it once you kind of put it out of your mind as a stock effect. But there's one other time I was playing this game, I was brought out of the experience by another stock sound effect that just did not fit there at all. But the music is phenomenal. The atmosphere is insane. The writing, it's funny, I actually missed what Silent Hill writing and voice acting sounded like. In the second and third game, the characters always talk in this very honestly bad manner where it seems like they're not in the same studio. They never have the right emphasis or impact on their words to the extent it feels like they're not really there, or it's all a dream to them, or they just have an inappropriate reaction to someone dying or falling on the ground or something else that makes it actually feel more like a existentialist piece of literature or some avant-garde work, which again adds to the atmosphere of the entire game. Speaking of references, what I was very interested to see is that this is kind of like a soft sequel to the second game, in the same sense that 3 is a direct sequel to 1. So with 4, the one kind of tidbit that they added here is that the superintendent of the apartment complex is Frank Sunderland, and who says his son disappeared many years ago in Silent Hill. So there's a connection there where, James's father is actually this apartment manager guy. And there, throughout the story, they also sprinkle on little comments and references to the cult in Silent Hill. And I know people are kind of mixed on the cult in the sense that it took a step, at least in 3, to over-explain and over-reveal the mystery of what Silent Hill really is, as it's just a cult. I mean, it's been there since the very first game, but I know some people are kind of iffy on it. It's funny, it did bring it up in this game, but I didn't really think it would make a huge difference, and it didn't. They just kind of reference it, so they don't expand on it, or... Well, I mean, they do kind of expand on it because it's part of Walter's main story, and it goes deeper into the psychological aspects of exactly who Walter is. And so there's something that I want to talk about now, kind of, not personally, but something that I think is canon in Silent Hill 4 that isn't really represented as canon. So, for example, the first thing that you see as Henry's character, and believe me, you don't really know much about this guy, where he goes to the door and the first thing that appears on the door from the inside is it says, "Don't go out, Walter." And this is introduced at the beginning of the game, far before you know who Walter is and his character, who's basically the main suspect in this series of serial murders. And so I think it's kind of, I don't know if people disagree or agree with this, but it seems pretty obvious that Henry is actually Walter, that they are actually the same person. And all of the killings going on in his head in the other world are actually him as his alter ego Walter in real life. And I kind of picture it as kind of a Fight Club scenario where the main character views Tyler Durden as this radical, out of control guy that he can't control, and there's nothing he can do about him. And it's only when he has this kind of psychosis or this kind of revelation that he's his alter ego, and all the Fight Club and everything have been revolving around him. So I kind of thought it was the same idea, that Walter is just Henry's alter ego, because again, Henry is so bland and so blank and has no backstory and nothing to say about himself because he's Walter's other self. He was experiencing all this. And there's this whole thing where like Walter killed himself in prison, years ago as the 11th victim. And then there was speculation that wasn't really him and it was someone else, or maybe Walter's spirit is possessing Henry or something. It's, these games are always very much open to interpretation. So I'm not going to put anything distinct, but it was very distinct in my mind that Walter and Henry were of the same psyche at least. And so essentially the final part of the game is basically deciding Eileen's fate, whether or not he's going to allow his shadow and his evil nature take Eileen's life and fulfill the sacraments, or if he's going to side with his other nature of Henry and decide to save her. And of course that's the main difference between the ending of the game, which is honestly kind of pretty difficult to do. So in the final segment of the game, the final boss, Eileen is walking towards her death basically, and you basically have this, to me it's a fight within your own mind and your own psyche. But basically the actual mechanic of what you have to do is you have to defeat the boss quickly enough before Eileen kills herself. And it's actually really hard. Like if you do everything absolutely right, you'll only save like a second or two from her dying. It's a very tight window, and it took me about 4 tries to actually do it. But regardless, I thought it was a really cool way to... everything about this game is super cool. That final boss in the final boss room, it's really good. And I think, speaking of rooms, it's time to talk about the room. So, when you look at this game, it looks awful. Like the other thing, the cover art with the guy screaming and it says The Room, and the Silent Hill series has never had any subtitles. It's not Silent Hill 3 Heather's Mission or something, it's always Silent Hill 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. And so putting a subtitle just makes it feel like this is some cheap knockoff, some other remix. It's like, what's the extent of The Room? The fact that you're stuck in it? Like, great. But no, they actually did a really interesting concept with The Room. Because you see, the room is the womb. And so the main actual plot or metaphysical idea of the story is that the room that Henry is stuck in, the backstory is that Walter, he was born in that room by his parents and not in a hospital, and as soon as he was born they abandoned him. And so it's this weird thing where he ends up being sent to Silent Hill, and the superintendent keeps the umbilical cord, and so he gets it, and so Walter gets adopted by the Wish Happily Foundation. That's actually the cult in Silent Hill. And in his mind, this is really interesting, in his mind, because he has no mother and father, the room he was born in is his mother. And that's a very, very interesting concept, and it makes sense to why all these things are happening. But to have the gall or the creativity to personify an environment with that amount of depth and psychological nuance it's really cool. I've never experienced even a horror movie I can really think of that personifies something like that. I mean, a typical horror story thing is that some person gets transformed into some kind of like a box or some kind of fairy tale-esque creature. They get turned into an animal or something. But someone not exactly turning into a room, but their like soul, and it's more like putting a new soul into an inanimate object and having that thing contain the person. It's such a wild idea that, and it's crazy because I've never seen it before, and this game really brought me back to remind me why I love video games, because they were able to personify and visualize these extremely complex ideas that just didn't exist in other mediums. You just couldn't do it, or didn't want to do it, or weren't creative enough to do it in film or whatever. And it's such an interesting concept. And so you get into the whole kind of maternal, paternal psychology. So you also have Child Walter, who's a character who's running around. And again, the implication is he's also Child Henry. And so you have these multiple selves. And again, it's the division of self of who's going to be the final victim, who's going to be the final decider in the fate of his neighbor, Eileen. And again, Eileen is great. She, I don't know. I mean, on their own, either character is kind of fine, but together they have this really cool bond where she's stuck in the other world, and Henry's trying his best to help her get out and solve the mystery, and how she's going to become a victim of him if they don't figure it out. And again, it just has this. It doesn't make sense, right? But the feeling behind it is so genuine, and it deals with that maternal, paternal essence. And the two endings really, are of a certain nature that all I can say is that this game is a piece of art. It is actually super thought-provoking, very philosophical, and again, deals with the basic values of what is a person, what is the value of a soul. It's a personification and visualization of a person's psychological state. Everything from Psychonauts to Evangelion, I love that stuff. I am a huge sucker for games that decide to visualize what the internal mind is. And of course with Silent Hill, the internal mind is a torture chamber, because someone is always tortured over some guilt they have that they need to get over. Except for one was kind of like a very straightforward, there's an evil cult and I need to stop them kind of thing, while the successors were much more 2 and 4 are really not based on an actual plot. It's very personal, which I really like. There's also the imagery of some guy jumping into holes, entrances, and entering in to a state or a room that is the personification of the maternal figure. And I don't know, it's just the confrontation between Henry and Walter is so interesting, because Walter basically feels spurned and abandoned, and basically he feels the only way he'll ever be loved is by doing this heinous series of murders that again are like lightly related to the Silent Hill main story. And Henry represents the will to retain yourself and to choose when to stop, and to choose to love oneself rather than having to outsource it to a cult and whatever. And again, it's overcoming his mental state and all the mental burdens that are part of, the game. And that's kind of, in a way, what Silent Hill is sort of about. It's always dealing with your guilt at the end of the day. That's really what it is. It's a psychological maze for dealing with guilt. And just the writing, too, into at the end for James's letter is just phenomenal. And here, it's also pretty good, but I mean, 2 is so strong. So that's the thing. I love this game. It really surprised me. I really, really love it. I still think 2 is better, though, but there's almost something a little bit more special about this game. Again, it's just very strange how the opening, the main character, a lot of things about this game are very bad compared to the other ones, but I think it really makes up for it in other areas for the overall story. And again, as you're going through this whole psychological journey with Henry and his kind of other forms of his egos, you're also getting a murder mystery as to exactly who is Walter Sullivan, how many people did he kill, when did he kill, who did he kill, how did he kill, what was the pattern on the numbers carved into the victims. And so it mixes reality with fantasy in a very cool way. And I don't want to spoil it, but there's a point in the game where you do finally unlock your door and you step outside into the real world. And it's a really good game. And again, I was not very impressed with it. I was kind of going to drop it because the intro and the opening were just so terrible, purposeless, and aimless. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to say. It's just like, this is not good. Like, no wonder people drop this. But it legitimately gets so good, like, starting in the second level. It starts becoming, okay, wait, this is going somewhere. This is starting now. And yeah, I don't know what to say about that first section. It's just not great. I don't know if I'd cut it or add more context or make Henry a real character that you can be introduced to and relate to. I think the strongest opening in the entire series, it's actually really hard to compare them, but I would say 3 is actually my favorite. Just the lighting in the restaurant where Heather is just such a mood, especially with whatever that song is, like Stairway of Sunset or something. I've never felt something so immediately than playing the opening of Silent Hill 3. And 4, just like, it falls flat on its face. But you just have to give it some time, and it delivers a really interesting story. And for someone who hasn't played Silent Hill in a long time, I was really, really glad to play something that really made me think they can't make a game like this anymore. And it's not because of any certain belief or censorship issue. It's just the fact it's so creative and it's so taboo, talking about maternal and paternal archetypes and psychological themes and ideas, that I can see the boardroom of shareholders would shoot it down immediately. They would not be interested in this because games are a product now. They're not an art form. And this is one game that stands out to me as 100% art rather than product. It feels like it's from such a different time in gaming's history, where people were just throwing anything to the wall to stick, and they allowed some really creative, fantastic ideas to be made, and 4 is one of them. And so I encourage you, if you enjoyed Silent Hill 1 to 3, I would give 4 a chance. I would go in knowing that the first act, the first level, is not great. It's kind of pointless. It's kind of bland, whatever. But there is an absolute gem that still rivals its contemporaries, that is just a couple more hours in. And I hate to be that guy who gets good a couple hours in, but it really does, especially if you are a fan of the Silent Hill series. So 4 is something that people sleep on. I would really, really recommend it, with the caveat you have to push through that first level and then get on with it. And again, I was planning to drop it, and the reason I kept going is because the actual structure of the levels was very simple. The puzzles were very simple. It felt very streamlined, and the pacing of this game and the plot were so good, they kind of redeemed it for me. And I'm so happy I stuck with it, because it's not the best in this series, but it's so different and so interesting. There's nothing quite like it. If it wasn't called Silent Hill 4, If this was its own standalone game, I think a lot of people would give it a lot more praise, just because it's being compared to something else that's much different, or not much different, but it, something that at least starts much better and differently. I guess on that point, the end theme, it's okay, but the main lullaby theme is it's perfect. It's really, really good. And yeah, 4 is great. I think honestly though, it's one of those games where I beat it, and I usually I'm very good at interpreting stories, obviously, but it kind of was necessary to have an ending explain video for this game. It is kind of, I would say, high IQ, or very, very symbolic and thematic, more than the other games. The other games actually kind of spell things out very well, especially the end of 2. It's very much spelled out what happened, what is reality. 3 is also very much based in reality. 1 is mostly based in reality. But 4, I would say, is the most abstract out of all of them. And for that reason, I think that might be another reason people might have gotten filtered. Like, I didn't understand what happened, or what went wrong, or even that Walter is Henry. Like, it's kind of alluded to, but not really. So anyway, absolutely fantastic game. I had that moment where you finish a game and you just kind of look at the game complete screen, and you just kind of sit there and you take it in. It's one of those games. It really, really is. And I think that would make me feel angry if I heard that, because the first hour of this, as I said, I was playing it, I did not like it. But I swear in my career as a gamer that this is absolutely worth playing, and is really a piece of art. It's really nice. And it controls pretty decently too. It's not totally awful. The gameplay's pretty alright. But yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to say about Silent Hill 4, The Room, Heimat. And yeah, I hope you Silent Hill fans play it and get a taste for, something that you might be nostalgic for and missed out on. Anyway, guys, that's all I got to say about this one. Fantastic game. See you later. Bye.